Ready?
There it goes.
All right, let's do this. Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the regular meeting of the Milton Equestrian Committee for Wednesday, August the 20th, 2025 to order. The time now is 6:31 p.m. As I call roll this evening, please confirm your attendance. Dan Buckner.
Here.
Teresa Jarmus. Mac Plummer. Shannon Regan-Quidley.
Here.
Tony Rich is here. Carson Seville.
Here.
Julie Shannon is not here. So for the record, Julie is missing tonight. We have a quorum. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. So the first item on our agenda tonight is approval of our meeting agenda. If everyone's had a chance to review that, if I could please ask for a motion to approve the agenda as written.
I'll make a motion to approve last meeting's agenda.
Second.
All right, second, I have a motion from Ms. Buckner, second from Mr. Plummer to approve the agenda as written. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, the agenda is approved. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the past meeting minutes from last month. If I could please get a motion and a second to approve the minutes from the June meeting.
I'm sorry, I thought I just did.
That was the agenda.
Motion.
Motion.
All right, I've got a first from Mr. Plummer, second from Ms. Regan-Quidley to approve the minutes from the June meeting. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Perfect. Emily, do we have any public comment tonight?
We do not.
Perfect. If that's the case, then we will move right along with our agenda to our next item, which are staff updates, discussion of large lot incentives. Welcome, community development. Thank you for being here.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, commission members. Let me see if we can get the screen up.
Why does my screen keep going out?
I think it's syncing up. Is it on?
Tonight, we are continuing our discussion on large lot incentives. This is something that we've been talking about since the beginning of the year, and we're making progress on discussing a number of different subjects. So what we're going to look at tonight is one additional incentive that we haven't discussed before, and then we want to review and summarize the other ones that we have talked about, confirm which ones the Equestrian Committee would like to proceed with, and then talk about how we're going to go forward on those items. So let's look at the incentives that we've already discussed. We've talked in the past about providing incentives for covered riding arenas, for hobby farms, for stormwater credits, home-based businesses, accessory buildings. We've looked at short-term rentals on 3 acres or greater. We've looked at waiving business license fee for horse farms, establishing an AG-exempt process. The one thing we haven't talked about that we want to talk about this evening is an option that our Public Works Department has suggested as an incentive, which is to provide additional access for large lots. And I'll tell you what that's about. Right now, our existing regulations say that when land is subdivided, the number of driveway points can't increase more than what's existing already. What we want to do is keep that and add to it that when you have large lots, 3 acres or greater in size, that each individual lot may have its own separate dedicated driveway. That will create an incentive for developers to have larger lots because it will allow them greater flexibility in how they lay out their subdivisions. As opposed to having one entrance point, they have multiple entrance points. They might be able to have larger lots because they're not having to try to subdivide in a very specific way around the access, the entryway. So that's something for you to consider. And this was something that was recommended by our Public Works Department. Do you all have any thoughts?
How does that work now? Because I know somebody told me something a while back, like you've got to have so many feet of road frontage in order to expand the number of driveways. There was something to the effect of, if there's a piece of property that they were going to try to subdivide, that you had to have so much road frontage in order to split it into more than one driveway.
So you have to have, there are distance requirements between driveways. But what this speaks to is the fact that if you ever had, for example, a large lot, 10 acres, that only had one entryway because there was only one driveway, then the way that the code currently reads is that you can't increase the number of lots, the number of driveways, even if you subdivide the lots. So if you've got 10 acres, you can still only have the one driveway, which necessarily means you're going to have a street with a cul-de-sac to get to the 10 acres.
So you're saying the driveway that's there currently could be widened and made into a road as an entry point?
So I think right now you got a 10-acre lot. People want to go in and put a neighborhood road in and do the lots like that. What they're saying is we're going to allow, I think the issue we're going to run into though with DOT especially is what the speed limit is and how much separation they require. Because I know we've had that before on planning commission where you have people splitting lots. And
Right, there are separation requirements, but right now there's no flexibility in the sense that if there's only one driveway for that large lot, then in the future condition, there can only be one driveway, which dictates a design.
In the
But,
footprint of the driveway.
right.
yeah, essentially a neighborhood instead of, now would that be dipping into the flag lots at all, you think?
Well, what that does is it helps, well, it provides flexibility. So, sometimes if you've got smaller lots and you can only have one driveway, then you have a flag lot and you've got 3 lots, for example, off of that 4 acres lot, right? You'd have 3 flag lots and one on the front. This would allow potentially 2 or 3 driveways. You can divide it up differently. You wouldn't have as many flag lots.
So right now, though, as it stands, it's like if we only have one driveway access, the only options are build one house out there, keep 10 acres, or put a neighborhood in and get it rezoned or replatted into different individual lots, developed into a residential. Is that right?
That's right. You either have one street with a cul-de-sac at the end, or you have a subdivision with multiple flag lots. So it becomes problematic. It's not the best design. This option gives us greater flexibility in saying you can have multiple driveways. So now, obviously, Public Works would have the final say on what's acceptable. They're not going to have driveways that are, 15 feet apart. But it does provide some flexibility, especially if you've got a situation like a corner piece where there are 2 frontages, but there was only one original driveway with one, access point. This gives greater flexibility in how that subdivision is laid out.
So right now, if we had like a 6-acre parcel on the corner and had a driveway, they couldn't split it into 2 3-acres and put a driveway from the other side?
Well, the difficulty is that right now, the code says you can't increase the number of access points from what's existing. So with a 6-acre lot that has 2 frontages, if they only had one driveway on that one side, then they're not supposed to increase the number of access points, which is the one.
And
This-
especially the large lots, they don't like to share the driveways, like, they would rather prefer to have their own access points. So it helps them actually having 2, access
I
points.
just don't want to incentivize everybody to split them. Or now they were.
Well, that was going to be one of my questions,
Yeah,
is
kick
what
it
is the
over.
downside to if we were to go that direction? Is there a downside, or is there a risk that you would split things up even more because you have the flexibility of adding driveways?
I see so many people building in their front pasture right now. They got this field in the front and it's like, well, let's just sell it off and put a house here. Because it's just.
But
I've
if
seen a
you-
lot of that.
But how would people get to that lot if you can add a driveway?
You know what I'm talking about? Some of the houses they've been building in people's front yards, like there's 2 on Freemanville that just got built, and
There's a couple on Cogburn
Yeah.
that are like that.
Are you talking about subdividing out the front yard and creating
Yeah,
a
the
separate
people
lot?
had a 6-acre lot. They must have replatted it to get a 3-acre in the front with, I guess, a shared driveway, maybe a separate one. It would be a separate one now. I know that guy's got a separate one.
It wouldn't affect that because you could do that now with a one entryway. You know what I'm saying?
I guess I'm just confused on if those people had 6 acres and one driveway and they sold their front field to somebody with a new driveway, how'd they do that?
Well, then you could divide it up into 2 3-acre parcels. Whereas if somebody wants to take that 6-acre lot and there's only one driveway, what they could do is just put a road down that one driveway and create 5 lots.
So you say the old driveway would now become a road,
Exactly.
Right, it would be a private drive,
but
a
doesn't it
road.
have to be a certain width?
It does, it would be. It can be, in that scenario, if you've got 6 acres and one house per acre and the driveway takes up some roadway width, some land area, then you can have 5 houses off that driveway.
Would it be possible, if, maybe not tonight, unless do you have examples tonight?
No, I don't.
I mean, would it be possible for, any of us that would want to come in and sit down with you guys and just pull up some examples to try to better understand that? 'Cause
Sure.
This is really interesting. I mean, I'm not quite sure I understand it, but I'd love to see some real life parcels.
Well, we can bring that to you next time, for sure.
However you
Different
do that, I mean,
examples.
Because I think it's got some real intrigue. I just don't quite understand it because I mean, it seems like every time I turn around, there's somebody that's selling off part of their pasture to create a new lot. And I'm not sure how they're handling the driveway unless they're just sharing a driveway.
Yeah, they
And the
do.
ones
They
that
create a
I've
flag lot.
seen,
Yeah.
The second house that's been built is closer to the road, so there's an access right from the road, the main road, to that house where the driveway to the original house that
Yeah.
sold off the property goes up the side and
Right.
to the back.
Well, like down the street from us on Bethany, they just built a brand new house.
Yeah.
And I thought they cut a brand new driveway in for that house. Unless I'm,
Yeah, they did
So
one
right
up
now,
the
we
street
do
from
allow
me.
a shared driveway when we create large lots. But as you know, shared driveway has easements,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah, they're
They are
easements.
not, they're not on perfectly on their property.
right.
This way, and this is not applicable to every situation, to be honest. We had one situation on Birmingham Road
Uh-huh.
that had a lot of frontage and they wanted to really subdivide all the lots, new lots would have frontage on Birmingham Road, and they all wanted to have the driveway, their own private driveway, but the code wouldn't really allow that. But we thought that by doing this change, Public Works could make that decision if allowing each lot its own private driveway at certain distance, of course, it's not going to be all
It'd be
clustered.
really interesting to go through some case examples. Of that,
Yeah,
'cause,
we'll do that for
I
you.
mean, I almost want to go drive around and see some of the new places that have been built and just say, oh yeah, they don't have their own driveway. They're sharing with the neighbor. I mean, it seems like every time a new house goes up, they just cut a new driveway in, pour concrete and landscape the entrance and boom, it's a new lot. But I don't know.
Well, let us do that. We'll put together some scenarios for
Okay.
you,
That'd
and
be
we can
great.
talk through that for our next meeting.
Thank you.
All right.
Another idea on this, though, this is different than what we're presenting, but if you owned a piece and you had your main driveway to your house, but I think it'd be nice to say if you own over 5 acres, 3, whatever you want to call it, you can put a access, and you probably can already do this, but you can put an access road to a barn. Might be considered a driveway, but it would,
Yeah.
that way, like I would do that at our place instead of driving a tractor down a paved driveway, put a gravel road in so that I'm not covering mud every time. And that's just an idea.
Okay.
Allow large lots to put an access road to a barn or pasture or whatever.
Yeah, I think if you
There's
already
one in the
have that
neighborhood where they
one,
just
we're
built
not
a
going to
barn,
decline it.
did
But
that.
Hang on one second. Hear what you have to say. Sorry. Go ahead.
I mean, if you already have those 2 access points on a property,
I'm
we're
saying
not
if
going
you
to
don't.
decline it. But I don't think right now they are allowing multiple
Yeah.
drive-through.
Go add those. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Very interesting. Thank you so much. This is really good.
All right, let's move on. One thing we want to do is to confirm what the recommendations are before we move forward with doing the work that goes into developing these recommendations. So I took a guess at what I thought I heard you say from our previous meetings, and I want to confirm that with you. So let's go through the list. We talked about covered riding arenas by right on 10 acres or greater with administrative approval. And if that's the case, that you want to recommend that, that would require a code amendment. Is that something that you agree that you wanted to recommend? We can also talk about what it looks like with a code amendment,
Right.
if you want to go through that. And we can do that.
What's everybody think?
I like
Well, I
that.
think we talked about it last meeting, and there were some, I guess, confusion about lighting and things, how that would affect neighbors, and we were trying to work through how covered rings in someone's front yard isn't going to affect.
All right, we'll look at the language for that then, because I have some proposed language and you can see what you think about that. The idea of creating a hobby farm use to differentiate it from AG exempt, I heard you say that you were not interested in pursuing that. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
Stormwater credits and special design considerations for large lots, I thought I heard you say that you were supportive of that. And we'll talk about what that looks like. Home-based businesses in accessory structure with administrative approval, and I thought you would be interested in potentially pursuing that.
And that home-based business, and maybe that doesn't mean verbose, that's a different item, right?
Yeah,
That's
That's for,
It
okay.
is, yeah.
Wait, remind me on the home-based business, that was,
So
were some of the
home-based,
examples?
yeah, we'll go, when we get to it, we'll talk about that. And then we talked about buffers on AG properties when subdivided next to large lots. And that was something we wanted to look at. And then short-term rentals, I heard a resounding no on that one.
No.
And then waiving business license fee for horse farms, I thought you were supportive of that. Establishing an AG exempt process, thought you were supportive of that. And then we will talk more about the access options next time, which is what we talked about just a minute ago. Let's look at all of these, all except the ones that have a no check marked next to them. So for covered riding arenas, right now, there are regulations about covered riding arenas, and what they say, if you go towards 2/3 of the way down, that a use permit has to be approved. And so what the proposal would be is that we change that from a use permit, which is a public hearing process, to an administrative permit, and that the administrative permit is subject to a list of criteria. And here is the criteria. We had the one covered riding arena on Wood Road, and it went through a public hearing process. And the criteria that was established for that, in order for it to get approved, is what's in this list. So we took that. The assumption is that if the folks who went through that process on Wood Road got this approved, then this would be the standard of what would get approved. And so in that case, the property is zoned AG1. The arena is not more than 24,000 square feet. Parking is set back 75 feet from any property line. Then we have the hours of operation. The height is not greater than 30 feet for the arena. Loudspeakers are prohibited. Then it has some sound levels. Lighting has to conform to UDC sections, which refer to lighting in residential areas. And then minimum 25% tree canopy has to be preserved on the property. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't have a covered riding arena in any other scenario. If you don't want to comply with this, you would go through the public hearing process. But if you could comply with this, it just saves you the 4 months of the public hearing process.
Does the public hearing require all this?
I'm sorry?
Does the public hearing require all these same items?
Well, that's the point of the public hearing. This is what the staff would recommend because this is what
Okay,
was
so
approved
they're gonna
last
follow
time.
this.
And then there would be a discussion and neighbors would be involved and, that sort of thing. There's a lot more opportunity to add things to it. But having gone through a public hearing process once for a covered riding arena, with this being the result, then we can establish this as a standard. And if somebody wants to do something other than this, let's say their covered riding arena is 30,000 square feet, not 24,000 square feet. Well, then they can go through a process and then there can be discussion.
How big is, I was gonna call it 42, sorry, seventh hand, arena?
It's 150 by 3 something,
150 by 300 or more?
more than 300, but you can just,
325?
yeah.
That's 48,700 feet. Do y'all know how big the Wood Road Carolyn Bell's arena was over there?
24. It was
24,000
under.
square
24,
feet.
and part of, it's the old ring, and part of it is not covered.
Okay.
So.
But I just think about 24,000 square feet. I mean, even if you did 150 by 250, which is a good size arena, that's 37.5. So what would you need to hit?
How big is yours?
My covered is only like 100 by 180. It's not that big.
What is that though?
That's 18,000 feet, right? That's 18,000 feet.
I mean, that seems like a good size.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. I just
That
was
is
sitting there
perfect.
24,000 feet, and is that I mean, that's not I think the one next door to us was a dressage arena. It was like 70 by 200. What's that, 14,000 square feet?
Mm.
And that was isn't that like what do you call it?
That's a regulation.
Dressage
Yeah.
arena.
Mhm.
So, okay, so 24,000 feet, you could get a decent arena out of that. You're not going to get max size arena out of that, but you can get a decent size arena out of that.
Well, and Max
So-
Arenas,
It's a
not
big-
what most people do.
Yeah.
Not
I mean,
Max
that's a
anymore. It's not
commercial
Max
It's
anymore.
not
facility.
max anymore.
Yeah.
Max like, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Not max anymore either. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Do we have any lenience on the tree canopy? Because I'm just thinking if we have a farm that's been here for years
Yeah, that's a good point.
and let's just say it's all pasture.
Well, then you wouldn't, that only really applies when you're cutting trees down, right?
Right, I mean,
It's just
that's right, that's when
preserved,
you're
right?
cutting trees down. If
Yeah,
you're
so-
not taking anything out to put that in, then
Still
you,
wouldn't maintain the
No, it-
25%?
No,
no.
if you don't take any out, you don't have to put.
Because I know like a lot of them require that for me. Okay, then that's fine. That'll work.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to put
As long as that's clear in there that you don't have to maintain it or
No,
meet that criteria. to
If you're
build.
cutting down trees to put it
Okay.
in, we want to make sure that you're not cutting all the trees down to put it
Right.
in.
I guess I'm thinking of the guy that's cutting down 3 pine trees in his pasture because they're where the covered arena is. But then there's not much other trees on the whole property, besides the borders.
I don't think 25% would apply then. You might have to do recompense to replace those.
Yeah, that's right.
Or something like that,
All right.
right? I think.
Yeah, we're not going to be looking at the whole site unless, what you're doing is impacting the whole site.
Yeah. But then,
Yeah.
again, if you're talking about tree stuff or the tree ordinance, I mean, when you get into like ag use for properties, does it really apply anyway?
No, but that could get messy with.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, would that get messy? If somebody wanted to cut trees down and they claimed ag, like the Bayless guy did on Birmingham? I mean,
that's something that would come through you under
Yeah.
under our ag exempt process. You would look at it and make that
I mean,
determination.
I'm all about tree canopy. I think tree canopy is an amazing thing because it's so easy for the builders and developers just to scalp it,
Ignore it, yeah.
So I think it's great to keep a tree canopy. I'm just curious if there's an ag exemption or if they could claim it kind of like he did over on Birmingham Highway that, hey, I just want to cut it all down. He didn't have to maintain 25% tree canopy on what he did, right?
Well, again, the process is changing so that somebody can claim it, but they're going to have to prove it to you.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
All right?
I like some tree canopy requirements. I think that's really good.
So if it's not a commercial operation, say somebody like me wants to cover their ring, the parking thing, I mean, I wouldn't have, if I was building my own covered ring, I wouldn't have parking for anybody because it's for me, and I don't have people coming and going. So is that a requirement that there has to be a parking
No.
situation?
No.
So that's just null and
Just
void.
No, it's just if you have it, it has to be
Marina
75 feet.
parking
Yeah.
shall be set back a minimum of 75 foot from the property line.
If you have it, if you don't have it, then it
Yes,
doesn't
yeah.
apply.
Okay. And the other question I have about that is,
It doesn't say commercial. does
no, it doesn't say
it?
commercial.
Okay, good.
But the other question I had, did I see somewhere that a requirement, you had to have 10 acres to do a covered ring?
Yes.
Okay, so what if Okay, I'm going to use myself as an example. I have 7 3/4 acres. What if I want to build a
I
covered
think you'd have to
ring?
go through the public hearing.
You
I'd
go
have
process.
to do a public hearing?
You got to go through the
This
public.
automatically gives them a right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're anything outside of these parameters, then you go through the normal process.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, so
Fair
It
it's,
enough.
doesn't mean it's a no. it
No,
just
it's fair
means-
enough. Yeah.
yeah, this is permitted for property, it's not permitted for properties containing less than 10 acres. So if you wanted to do it on less than 10 acres, you'd need to get a variance from
variance.
that. But if you had 10 acres, and if this additional criteria was added to the code, then you wouldn't have to go through a public hearing to get a covered
Right.
riding arena.
Right.
Okay?
You know, one of the things, I mean, I think this was with any code change, right? It'll be interesting to see once a lot of this gets presented, you know, for public input. I mean, I know people can come to this meeting and I assume make comments on this stuff, but, you know, once it actually gets drafted into a presentation for council, it'll be interesting to see, you know, what the public's opinion are of things like this, because
That's true, and it also, remember, it's a change to the Unified Development Code, so it goes to the Planning Commission too.
Right.
And then there's a Community Zoning Information Meeting, so there's another opportunity. There'll be at least 3 other opportunities for people to participate in this discussion.
right, perfect. Okay.
So now let's talk about stormwater credits. And I don't know if you recall, our stormwater engineer came and provided us with a very detailed, high level, certainly high level for me. Yes.
There's a lot of chatter after that meeting.
Discussion, but the good news is that there was a very sort of simple takeaway, and that is that he recommended that 4 of the state-approved best management practices recommended for use in large lots be incorporated as special considerations for large lots. These are not normally considered, but he was saying if we put it in the code that it would be considered, then that would be additional opportunities to, you know, deal with stormwater that would benefit large lot. Dry wells, infiltration trenches, infiltration practices, rainwater harvesting, regenerative stormwater conveyances. He also talked about setting aside in recorded conservation easements that some people may want to do that. And if they do, then that area is not counted towards what has to be included in the calculations for stormwater, which will help. Definitely help the folks who are, for example, on a creek with buffers and things like that, because then the whole site doesn't have to be calculated. It creates more area in the calculation, so that creates a bigger issue. But if you're on a creek with buffers, you can't develop there anyway. Why count that towards the entire lot? Put it in a conservation easement. And this is also helpful to folks that are on large lots, because those things, you know, if you ever wanted to sell to somebody who would subdivide, they can't, that's not buildable. They can't build on that anyway. So you're not really giving anything up, except the conservation easement allows you to, you know, get a better situation for whatever you're trying to do on your own property without having to spend extra money compensating for stuff that, you know, isn't necessary. So he talked about all of those things, and then he added one last thing, the director to approve a variance, giving the director the flexibility to have variances where possible, where it makes sense, because that isn't currently in the language. For certain situations, that would merit that sort of thing. And so then what the proposal is here is to take the standard, this is the section of the code that deals with the stormwater management requirements for new development and redevelopment, 11.4. And then point 3B talks about the requirements for the concept plan. And it talks about you have to submit a concept plan with a layout, calculate preliminary estimates, perform appropriate best management practices and show how that is on C. And then the proposal is to add a D after that for properties of 3 acre or greater, special consideration to be granted for the use of dry wells, infiltration trenches, infiltration practices, rainwater harvesting, and regenerative stormwater conveyance towards meeting stormwater management requirements. Recorded conservation easements may also be used. In addition, the director may approve a variance for determining alternate stormwater design methods that meet stormwater management objectives. And so that is a way of trying to provide some flexibility for large lots that the typical, developer subdivider is not going to have.
So the conservation easement, is that, you talking about a CUVA? Or
CUVA is for the entire property and has to do
Right.
with taxes. This is not. This is a conservation easement, which says that you basically take a section of your property, whatever whatever is in the easement, and say that this shall henceforth be conservation and not developed. Which, like I say, for CUVA, you're including your entire property, which some of it or maybe most of it is developable. And you're just saying that for 10 years, we want it to be taxed at this rate because we're not going to develop it, but it goes away in 10 years. Conservation easement doesn't go away, but it also, you want to apply it to the part of property that can never be developed anyway. The creeks, the streams, the stream buffers, anything that is not developable anyway is never going to be able to be developed.
And then the credits that you would get from these infiltration and all that, are we essentially trying to reduce the size of the bioretention pond or potentially eliminate it?
It's possible. What it means is that you just take that part of the property and take that acreage out of the calculations for stormwater. So it's like it's not there.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Okay.
So it reduces the requirement just because.
Yeah, well, your
theory,
bioretention would be a lot smaller.
Yeah.
Everything you have to do is smaller and less because that part of the property is not included.
So I like the part about the director may approve variance for alternate storm design methods. That seems to open the door for a little flexibility and creativity on coming up with a way that is maybe outside the norm of what we've seen in the past.
That's right. And again, it's on a case-by-case basis where it's merited. It's not just in general.
How does that align with state requirements? Because I always got the impression that some of these stormwater regulations weren't things that we came up with as a city, but they were really.
No, they are. They are all state requirements, but the state allows certain flexibilities if you adopt those flexibilities.
Okay.
Let's talk about home-based businesses and accessory structures. So what we wanted to talk about is consider allowing a home-based business to operate in an accessory building on large lots with an administrative permit instead of by special use permit. So let's look at what a home occupation is. And I want to talk through all of these things, but skip number 3 for just a minute. So a home occupation is a business that you can do out of your home, provided that it meets all of these rules. Number 1, it's operated by members of the resident family only. In other words, no employees. The people who live there work the business, and that's it. No outside people come in to work there. Number 2, only occupants of the dwelling may work on the premises. The next thing, it can't be more than 750 square feet. Okay, number 4, no signs identifying the home occupation, nor may be any storage, display, or activity associated with the home occupation visible outside the structure. In other words, you running this business in your house, nobody's going to know about it. So you're not having any outside storage, signage, any other way to let people know that there's a business in this home. Then there's a whole list of uses that are excluded for obvious reasons: auto repair, funeral homes, kennels, motels, restaurants, those sort of things. These are the types of businesses that absolutely cannot be a home occupation because of the nature of the business. Then we look at, you have to have licensing. No home occupation may generate traffic, sound, smell, vibration, light, or dust that is offensive. So that's pretty much everything that might be objectionable to neighbors can't happen as a result of this home occupation. No more than 2 clients or patrons are allowed on the premises at the same time. So it's not like you can teach a class for 30 students all at once, all right? Vehicles kept on site must be used by residents only. So we're not going to have any work trucks parked on this property. Incoming vehicles related to the home occupation must be parked off-street. And home occupations must exclude the use of instruments, machinery, equipment that can emit sounds detectable beyond the unit. So essentially, the home occupation is restricted to only those things that no one would ever know about outside of the home, right? If somebody is conducting a kind of business that their neighbors are absolutely unaware of, then that's a permissible home occupation. So now, let's look at number 3. It says right now, not what's written in red, but all the other words. Right now, it says accessory building and structures must not be used for the home occupation. So what you can do in your house right now is not allowed in your accessory structure. So if you had, for example, a guest house, and you wanted to maybe do your home office there where you run some kind of insurance business, internet insurance business or something, you can't do that in your accessory structure, even though you could do it in your house. There's something about the accessory structure that makes that a problem, but it's difficult to understand why, because we have, as a home business, we've regulated every aspect of this use that could be objectionable to neighbors. So what difference does it make if it's in the accessory structure or if it's in the main house? Because you could have it, in the main house. So what we're suggesting is that accessory buildings or structures not be used for home occupations on lots of less than 3 acres. But for those lots that are greater than 3 acres, you can have a home occupation in an accessory structure with an administrative permit. And what we would do with the administrative permit is check all of these boxes and make sure that the folks who are having this home occupation are abiding by all of these restrictions. Understand that when they get a home occupation license, they also have to verify and they have to certify with a notary that they are not going to do all of these things. They have to swear under oath that they will comply with this in order to have their home-based business. It seems that, if you've got somebody that's going to all that effort, the city will be covered, whether it's in an accessory structure or the main structure.
This is only for lots greater than 3 acres.
Only for lots greater than 3 acres.
But what about if you had more than 3 acres and you decided to do an equestrian business and you looked at, which one is it? Number 7, with teaching people how to ride horses, you're going to have sound, smell, dust. You might just click a lot of these things if you were going to have some sort of an equestrian business on a piece of property, right?
Well, if you've got a riding area that could generate dust, you're going to have that whether it's a business or not.
But you'll also have employees.
I'm sorry?
You would have outside employees
Employees.
that don't live, and it says you can't have an employee.
No, you can't have employees.
How would you have a trainer?
Well,
Well,
if
this
you,
is just about the building, because there's plenty of farms that have businesses here that have employees and,
Right.
Where I am confused about it is, let's say there's someone they're an artist and they sell their artwork or their pottery or whatever. Or maybe you own a call center where you're doing technical support on your phone and you decide to go do that in your little outbuilding. I don't understand why that would be a problem, especially if it's a home-based business. I know when I'm at home and I'm working, I got my AirPods in, I'm walking all over the place. So I don't understand why there would be that kind of.
I think the intent is to prevent a lot of people from starting businesses in their front yard. You have the signs and the equipment all over the place.
So this is also.
Oh, no, I
encourage
get that,
people
but
to-
I'm talking specifically about this item number 3. Who cares if I'm taking phone calls in my hay barn?
that's the point, is that it really shouldn't make a difference. But the code currently reads that you can't do a home-based business in an accessory structure. And so it makes sense then to, as an incentive, for large lot owners, this is one more thing that they would have that others don't have.
Put it this way, if you went out to your barn at your house and you decided, I don't want to do horses anymore, I'm going to start teaching saxophone lessons. And you had 12 kids out there honking on their saxophones.
Oh, God, I would never
And
do
just driving your neighbors through the roof. In theory, they could call the city and say she's running a home-based business out of a barn, and she's not supposed to do that.
Well, no,
think.
I
Is
understand
correct?
that concept. Yeah, I understand that concept. I think,
But you being on your phone and
well, someone I
nobody
know,
really cares. I mean, nobody really pays attention.
someone I know, and they don't live in Milton, they live in Roswell, but they are a hairstylist and wanted to leave the commercial salon and put their salon in their home. And she has an outbuilding that she doesn't live in. And I just would hate to see that keep someone from being able to do a home-based business, because I don't know what occupying an accessory structure has to do with the home-based business.
Well, in Milton, if this person that you're referring to lived on less than 3 acres, she could apply to get a special
For a
use
permit,
permit
okay.
to go through that process. If she lived in Milton and this were approved on greater than 3 acres, then she wouldn't have to go through a
Okay, my
process.
misunderstanding.
It doesn't mean you
I-
couldn't
I'm
do it, you
sorry.
just got to get a permit to do it.
Right.
Yeah, sorry, my misunderstanding.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that we got to realize too, is a lot of these incentives don't mean that if you don't click all the boxes, you could never get approval. You just have to get approval.
Right.
Whereas if we were to get these through the process, they would be a right as opposed to getting a special
That
permit
makes
to get
sense.
approval to do it.
It's just, we're trying to create a list of benefits for
Yeah.
people who own 3 acres or
If you got
more.
a big piece of land, you got a lot more flexibility to kind of do things without
Exactly.
going through a lot of hoops.
Exactly. And, there may be a lot of things that we offer people who live on 3 acres or more that they will never have a need for. But it's nice to know that, if you've got more than 3 acres or more, then you have certain advantages that other people don't have because you own a large lot.
Yeah, I get that.
Okay,
It's good.
thank you.
Let's talk about residential buffer. This one, a little bit maybe more difficult to understand, but we had talked about consider requiring a vegetative buffer along shared boundaries when a new subdivision is proposed that has 2 or more times the number of lots as the adjacent large lot. You remember I provided this example where we have this piece of property here, which is 10 acres, another piece of property here, which is 10 acres, and then this one, which is also 10 acres that now somebody has purchased and wants to subdivide into just a standard subdivision. Well, so now property number 2 would end up with 4 lots next to them. So that really affects the quality of their living environment, where they used to have 1 neighbor. Now they've got 4 backyards with maybe 4 swimming pools. And so it makes sense to have a separation. Normally, we only have separation between commercial uses and residential uses, not between residential uses. But there is no recognition in the code that different types of residential also occasionally warrant some special consideration. If you're 1 house on a large lot, you're up next to a subdivision with many homes, then there needs to be some kind of separation to protect the privacy and the character of this particular lot versus what this one will become. And so I want to talk about what the requirements are for commercial buffers so that we can then talk about residential buffers. Right now, Milton Overlay 6.3 talks about where you have commercial next to residential, then there's a requirement for buffers. For sites on 4 acres or less, there's a 50-foot wide undisturbed buffer required for commercial property. And then for sites on 4 acres or more, 75-foot wide undisturbed buffer where you're next to an agricultural district. So this is commercial. The reason I point this out is because we don't have one for residential, but what I'm proposing is that we add one for residential, and it would maintain the same 4 acres or less, 50 foot, 4 acres or more, 75 foot.
What does a landscape buffer look like?
I was just about to ask the same thing.
Well, if there are a whole bunch of trees that are existing, it means that they can't be disturbed.
Okay.
If it's just pasture and there's nothing there, it means it has to be planted. It's a vegetative buffer.
But when you think of, I mean, are you planting it with azaleas, or are you planting them with?
No,
I
you
think
plant
of
it with
dirt. I think
trees.
of dirt and kind of
trees.
dunes and
Like a berm or whatever?
yeah.
Trees. So let's look at this language. Okay, so residential buffer standards. So when a subdivision to create more than 3 residential lots is proposed that has 2 or more times the number of lots along a shared property line with an adjacent residential property of 3 acres or greater, the proposed subdivision is 4 acres or smaller, a 50-foot undisturbed buffer is required. If it's 4 acres or more, a 75-foot undisturbed buffer. It's the same standards as for the commercial, but it's residential next to residential. The undisturbed buffer does not include easements, detention, or grading. It has to be platted as a separate lot. It cannot be counted towards the lot area calculations, and it may be supplemented with additional plant material if it's sparsely vegetated to begin with. We're trying to create a buffer. So what it would look like in this scenario, you've got a 4-acre lot on the left, you've got a 6-acre lot on the right. The 6-acre lot is proposed to be subdivided into these 4 lots. So obviously the 4 lots, these 3 lots next to the 1 lot meets the requirement of 2 or more times the number of lots along a shared property line. And this is more than 3 acres. And so then, because the proposed subdivision is greater than 4 acres, a 75-foot undisturbed buffer is provided along the shared property line. So that's what that would look like. And so we're used to have one house here and one house here, and now this house is going to have to live with 4 new houses. These people have to provide them with a 75-foot undisturbed buffer.
I see
Questions?
nothing wrong with that.
Sorry?
I see nothing wrong with that.
Okay, good.
What's the significance of 3 residential lots?
It's just more than the 2, which would trigger,
It's more than double.
yeah,
Okay.
it's more than double. All right, let's move on. Business license fee, there's really not much to say about that. You had talked about it. The business license fee is $175. It's not a big hit for the city. So proposing that is just a nice feature, a nice amenity for the
Do we
farms.
know how many farms currently pay a business license fee?
Probably just a few. Not a lot of them are commercial, right?
I mean, that's one of those words that I wonder, how do you define that?
Well, if you're not running it as a business, you don't pay a business license fee, right? If you just have it for your personal use.
Well, does any farm that gives 1 horse lesson to a kid qualify as a commercial?
Well, they have to make that determination.
That's a home-based business.
I just asked a question because I remember.
Well, it is still a business. It's a for-profit, right? It's not non-profit.
No, I think when you think of like riding academies, which, we don't have that many of anymore, but, like Mac's old place, that's definitely a commercial place. The couple places over on Wood Road, those are definitely commercial. And I would venture a wild guess that the 3 farms that I'm thinking of on Wood Road do have commercial licenses.
Okay, curious.
But, and I think that's been a point of contention on our webpage, where we're asking for people to tell us about their business and give us the information so we can promote your riding academy. And then we need a copy of their business license, and we want to see their insurance certificate. And I think that's scared a lot of people away from being on our list of places we can tell people where to go to ride. So waiving that, I
If
think would
this
be a
would
good thing.
encourage that.
Yeah, I think that would be a good thing.
More transparency, that'd be
Yeah.
great.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think you guys can help us actually build the community or the list of people
Yeah.
who own horses and does teach
Mhm.
horse riding and things like that. So because right now they were so scared to register. We don't even have a registry. But once we take this waiver, this fee away, they might be able to register
agree.
and we can have a legitimate registry.
Right.
How much is the fee?
175.
175.
175.
How many?
175.
175.
Not a huge number.
But it helps. Something. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, every little bit. Good.
All right. And then the AG exempt process we went through last time, and basically what we did was identify the fact that AG exempt is not something that runs with the land. It's an occurrence with each event. You would have to apply for the exemption for that activity at that time. And so we have an initial request for an exemption, and then if somebody wants to do something, somebody that's had an exemption in the past, and they want to do something more to their property, then there's a process for coming in, specifically for that activity, and the equestrian committee would review it and determine whether or not that activity supported the AG function, right, the AG use. And so that is really what we were looking to do. And if that's something that you want to pursue, then we'll put together the paperwork for the application and whatever else goes with that to make sure that everybody, has the paperwork they need when they want to put an application forward for consideration.
And we would have the applicant present in this meeting, right?
The applicant would come to a meeting. That's
And have
right.
a
It would be in this.
presentation.
It would be in this setting. This is the forum for their request, and you all would review that request and make the determination whether what they wanted to do was in furtherance of whatever that AG use was.
So the only recommendation I'd make to this, the application right now is pretty broad. I want to make sure if someone did come present to us, they know what all that entails.
Yes.
And we probably need to list out, do we need concept plan? Do we need, what do we need? What does the applicant need to come present to us so that they can be prepared? So we're not just filling them with questions and they're not, and then they got to come back and it delays the process.
Yeah, and we will present that to you. We'll provide you with the forms that we intend to use, and you can look at it and tell us if there's more information you'd like to have initially, or if we've missed something, that sort of
This is
thing.
more conceptual, and then once we
Yeah,
get to that point, then we'll talk about the process.
yeah. Which leads us to the last thing, and that is if you all have any additional incentives that you would like us to explore. And this may be something that you want to think about. We certainly know we're coming back next month to talk about the scenarios for the additional access points that we discussed earlier. But if there is something that you would like us to think about or come up with a way to see if we can incorporate, if there's anything you want to talk about now, that would be great. If you want to think about it and send an email, then we can do that as well. But what we want to do is get to the city council with all of our very best ideas, and we'll even show them, some of our, ideas that we decided to pass on, just to be able to show them that we have looked at everything in as comprehensive a manner as that we possibly can.
I'd love to have a way for people to build chicken coops and run-in sheds. Maybe a set of plans that's like, here's the equipment material list, here's how you build it. As long as you follow this, you're good to go. Because I had a neighbor permit a chicken coop the other day, and I was like,
Permit?
oh yeah, he 16 by 10, and I went in and did the permit just in case. And
So that was actually number 5 on the slide 3, I guess. Where we confirmed the recommendation. I think they don't want to have the accessory buildings in the front, right?
well, that's we don't want a run-in shed to be considered an accessory building
Okay, so
for sure.
You just want to have running shed okay in the front or anywhere on the
No,
property.
I'm saying I would say put it anywhere, but also not have to get a permit to build it if we have a set of plans that if you agree to follow it. Now, if somebody comes out there from the city and it's built out of pallets, okay, no, we're going to shut you down. But here's the plans that I could probably get ChatGPT to create them for us and show them to staff.
So you're
But
saying even if they didn't have to get a permit at the very end of the process, they still have to get it inspected to make sure that the homeowner followed.
I mean, we don't want them building trash, there is a liability on that, but I would like to make it easy for people to build chicken coops and animal shelters that are not housing animals, but housing them from stuff like
So is there
this.
a way to say any structure under a certain size does not require?
That's going to get messy though.
Well, I'm just saying, put it this way.
You're going to have
Go
people
to one
building
end of the
shacks.
extreme. Clearly, you don't need a permit to build a
Lean-tos.
doghouse, right? I mean, if you're going to build a doghouse in your backyard for Fido to live in, I don't think anyone's going to go through a permitting process. Well, why would a chicken coop be any different? Unless it's a gigantic chicken coop, right? I mean, if 16 by 10, I don't know. I'm not a chicken guy, so I don't know how big of a chicken coop that is. It's a pretty good size, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you can walk around in it, but
I don't think it needs to be a process that has as much red tape as if you're building a barn. I mean, a chicken coop ought to be
I think what
pretty
Carson's saying, though, if we had a plan that we gave them and said, yes, here's what we recommend, here's what the materials cost, here's the dimensions, this is what you follow, and you don't have to have any kind of permit if you follow this plan, but then somebody's got to inspect it.
Well,
if you
the
show
thing
up
is,
and it's
we
built
can't,
with toothpicks,
we don't inspect unless there's a permit. You can't call for an inspection without a permit number.
So is there a way, in theory, to make it easier for someone to construct a simple chicken coop or a run-in shed?
Or a three-sided run-in shed.
Because my biggest fear is, like, I haven't built a run-in shed well, I've never built one. My farm came with them, thankfully. But if I were going to build a run-in shed, I mean, I don't want to have to go get a set of architectural plans and an engineering plan and a site disturbance, whatever. I don't want to have to go through all that just to build a running shed. I mean, that's a weekend project to build a running shed. So
Yeah.
is there a way to say if you own greater than X number of acres, that there's a way to make it easier?
I think what the city can do is to develop a set of approved plans. In other words, plans that if you build this, you're not going to have any issues with the permitting process. You'll still have to get a permit because the whole point of the exercise, I know, we don't necessarily want to go through the hassle, but we also don't want our neighbor to not go through the hassle. And then when we have a strong wind or a storm, have this thing blow in our yard because they didn't tie
Or if
it.
they're building in the setback right up next to the property. I mean,
Or
I know
there's a
gotta
lot
be-
of things that we look
Yeah.
for, and making sure that it's tied down is a safety issue because you don't
Right.
want it to blow away and you don't want it right on the property line. And there's a whole bunch of other things that even though individually we don't want to do, we certainly want our neighbor to do. So we have to have these rules for a reason. It's for protection.
But I just want to make it to where, again, I take the example of a doghouse. I mean, I can't even imagine going to the city and getting a permit to build a 3x5 doghouse in the backyard, right? I mean, I don't think anybody would, practically speaking, think that someone should do that. But where do you draw the line? Like, where is there a point? What if someone wanted a chicken coop that was just 4x8, a little tiny little chicken coop in the backyard? They want 6 chickens. Do they really have to go through the permitting process to build that on a Saturday with their kids?
Well, but most people don't. And so, there's no liability on the city's part because they don't ask and we don't know. The
But if
thing
I
is-
bought a trampoline at Dick's Sports and put it in my backyard and a storm came and blew the trampoline across the yard and
Well,
into my neighbor's house,
the trampoline is
Are
not a
liable.
I'm liable
structure.
for that
Yes.
just as if I built a chicken coop.
I know, but the trampoline is not a structure. The chicken coop, depending on the scope, the magnitude.
Well, my doghouse is a structure too.
It is.
So
but-
where do you draw the line to where you either have to get a permit or you don't?
Well, it's actually where you draw the line because the city requires structures to be permitted. And that includes anything that's a building, anything that's a fence. Structures have to be permitted. If you decide that it's a small doghouse and you're not worried about it, and most people do make that decision, then if there's a problem, there's no city involvement in that. But if there's a run-in shed, for example, which is not a small structure, you want to get a permit for that because you want to make sure that it's compliant. You don't want to have a problem with your neighbor when you find out that you built it too close to their property line, or that they think it's too tall, or some other issues, or that the contractor built it without strapping it down. So you want to get a permit for that. The way we can make it easier is by developing sort of a standard set of plans that if you built this, you don't have to submit
It's just,
anything.
you know, the spirit of all of this is just create incentive and to make it a little bit easier for someone who has large acreage not to have to go through maybe the same level of red tape that someone on 1 acre would have to go through, right? So just to make it a little easier for people to do that, I think would be a legitimate incentive. I just can't even imagine why someone would have to go through. And again, I haven't done this very often, but would someone really have to go get an engineering plan to build a running shed?
No, you don't have to get an engineering
Yeah,
plan,
no.
but you
I
have
don't
to know
I
how.
don't know about that.
Well, you gotta
You've
show
gotta
that it's
build it.
structurally sound and secure.
If you're
Footers
building
and
it,
all that
if
stuff.
if you're hiring a contractor to build it, then they'll draw up a plan because they know how to build it. If you're building it, you better know how to build it or it's going to fall down or blow
Well, I
away.
agree, but that would be where it's really nice if the city had more streamlined, simple process for the homeowner to be able to do that.
I could see it being like the fence permit. Like, it took me 5 minutes to get a fence permit, paid the fee, and they said, this is what the requirements are. Here's what you gotta do. And I just did it, and that was it. So,
You want something that simple.
yeah, you
It
get, I
it
just,
is, it
it
is
took
that
2
simple,
seconds.
actually. A lot of people give us, like, they buy shed from Home Depot.
Oh,
It's just
we're
a
not
small
doing
shed.
that.
The process is really simple, just a basic plan. They can even hand draw it, how big it is, where exactly it is. As long as it's a scale drawing, we accept it, you know. It doesn't have to be engineered drawings.
But we can simplify for the things that you can't buy at Home Depot, like a shed,
Yeah.
like a stick-built accessory structure, like a run-in shed or a chicken coop. We could create a set of plans that if you decided you wanted to adopt the city standard for run-in shed, you wouldn't have to provide any drawings because we would already have them. You would just have to show where it's located on your property and then get a permit.
I like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds better.
Mhm.
I think that's, a lot of times, like, I've had enough conversations with individual committee members where they'll say, well, is this a real incentive for somebody? Like, do people that are existing, it's one thing to encourage new investment, right, in properties and making the process easier to build and develop and all that stuff. But to give an incentive for someone who already owns a big piece of land to make a process like that easier, I think that's a real incentive that people would see value in. Like I building a chicken coop in my backyard, I guess we're in a public forum, but I'm not going to build a chicken coop. I'm not a chicken man, but I can't even imagine I would go through the process of building a 6x8 little thing in my backyard and going through the process of getting a permit. That just strikes me as bizarre to even have to think about doing that.
It does.
So I don't know. I just, in the spirit of encouraging people to have large tracts and live the rural lifestyle that we all are trying to do, it just seems like the more straightforward and easier it is, that's going to be real incentive for property owners. And just like the doghouse idea, a chicken coop isn't a whole lot more to me than that.
Well, but like when you look at it up on Highway 9, actually by the police station, the fire station, there's a little place that sells play sets and little
Yeah.
prefab buildings. They come to you and they put that up. So that requires a permit?
Yes. Yeah, if it's a shed.
I bet
it
that law
requires a
followed
permit.
a lot. Yeah, like a kid's playhouse or
Yes,
a
it
garden,
does.
a
It
garden
does.
shed.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think
we could keep working on this.
I think we could keep really having some interesting conversations on this particular topic. I think there's some real possibilities around very simple, small improvements on a property. Maybe if you live on more than 10 acres and you stay away from the setbacks, you don't have to go through a lot of red tape to get approval to do this. I do think being able to put a run-in shed in your front yard is a no-brainer if you have a farm. That shouldn't even be more than a 5-minute conversation just to say, hey.
Well,
you know,
maybe we just need to reword it. Maybe we just need to call it a animal shelter, you
Well, you
know?
gotta be careful because if they think it's housing animals, then you got a 100-foot setback from every property
Just
line.
a shelter.
So if we do run-in shed, then it's only for rain and shade. We
Right.
can make sure I don't want to flirt with that 100-foot thing.
Gotcha.
Because then
Right.
narrow
Then you're
properties, you're
housing.
not having one.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense.
This is really productive conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff.
I know we go in circles a little bit, but you know, as a committee, we never have the chance to get together and beat these ideas around with each other. You know what I mean? We just.
We're only allowed to
we
talk
only
in
can
meetings.
Really hash this stuff out when we're sitting in this kind of a setting. But I just, you know, even I see Greg back there going like this, and I mean, it's helpful. It really is very valuable conversations
Yeah.
to talk about this, because you bring up some legitimate ideas. You're right. I mean, if you're going to build a running shed, you don't want to go out there and, you know, sink 2x4s in as your post. Well, that's not going to cut it. But there may be some people, unless they've got some real guidelines, that they might do that. And in that case, we don't want someone to be able to do that without certain parameters and approvals from the city. So, you know, it's a real fine line. So who else has other ideas? Anything else? You know, one of the things that we brought up before, when we had a meeting with some of the folks, was, you know, you've got incentives that encourage large lots, but you've also got some disincentives for small lots. And, you know, I know the other night at the council meeting, they were talking about impact fees. And one of the ideas that Carson brought up in one of our discussions was, you know, the impact fees for a large lot might be this amount. Well, the impact fee for a 1 acre lot might be this amount. And so all of a sudden, if the impact, I'll make it up, if the impact fee for a 1 acre lot was $100,000, as opposed to $5,000 for a big acreage tract, as a builder or developer, I could see that developer going, I'm not going to pay $100,000 per 1 acre lot impact fee. I'm going to think about doing large acres instead. So,
Well, they were saying they'd pass it on to the homeowner.
well, they would only do that if the homeowner would pay it.
Right.
And if the buyer isn't willing to pay it, then they're going to find out real quick, they're going to get stuck with a bunch of inventory they can't sell.
Yep.
So as a result, they're going to have to figure out a solution to that. So I guess just as a broad stroke idea, I think it would be helpful to talk about disincentives for small acreage tracts development, as well as incentives for large acres.
I agree.
And I think when you get into things like impact fees and stuff, I think that really would make a difference.
Yeah, because I feel like we only got one shot to get all this in front of council, and then we don't want to rewrite text and code multiple times. So you've done an amazing job.
Oh, yeah.
This is
No doubt.
well beyond what we thought we were.
But I think if
Yeah.
we make it as a city, if we make it painful for the developer to do the high density neighborhoods, no one's going to do it. They're going to be like, you know what? It's not worth doing it in Milton because it's so ridiculously expensive to have 1 acre lots that we would rather go somewhere else. And I think that's going to be, I mean, the power of the purse really drives actions. And if we make it painful to develop neighborhoods with 1 acre lots, I think it's going to accomplish maybe as much as the incentives to go large acres. So my soapbox is done.
I agree wholeheartedly, Tony.
Anyway, so does anybody have anything else? Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Diana.
Thank you.
You stay with us late, and we really do appreciate that.
Yeah. it's
And
a
we
long
will
day for
see you next month.
We can't wait.
All
All
This
right.
has been fantastic. So thank y'all very much.
Thank you so much.
Diana, can you pull up that picture when you were looking
Yes.
at for me, please?
If I can get the screen back up.
You got something?
Just real quick, less than 5 for this,
Okay,
right?
perfect.
Unless you got something else we got to talk about
Nope.
first, the new business.
Nope, I was going to move on. I don't think we have any more new business. I was going to go to unfinished business next on our agenda. So with that in mind,
So
I'll turn it over to you.
I just had this idea. I drove by one of these on Premiumville the other day, and
Mhm.
this is not my idea, but if we could even, I'd like to figure out a way that we could do certified Milton family farm or something. So the city, possibly, if we could get the pricing right, would put something similar to this and give it to the farm owner with the farm's name and certified Milton farm in this similar format or whatever we agree on, and they could hang it on their fence and it would give them some
Ability,
ownership. But
yeah.
the city would just say, hey, we got this made for you.
We recognize
free.
you as.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think it's really
People
cool.
love
Really
stuff
good
like
idea.
But make it something they'd want to put up.
You want to celebrate
Yeah.
what somebody's done with their property. I think it's a great idea.
I love
I don't think it'd be really expensive, but I think it could,
No.
I think it could make people feel pretty good about what they've invested in.
So just basically recognition from the city that this is in
Right.
fact,
A
farm.
certified city Milton
Bona fide.
farm or whatever we call it.
Yeah.
The farm name in the middle,
Mhm.
I
Three
will
Oaks
say the
Farm.
other side of the equation is, we don't want to junk it up either. We don't want to have like signs everywhere.
Yeah.
Again,
They don't
They
have
can
to
be
be
tasteful.
big.
I'm thinking like this big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hangs on the fence. You drive by, you can see
I
it.
think that's awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that'd be really cool.
And they'll all be the same, so it'll keep it from looking junky.
Well, and
So
it might
this is
be,
a certified farm or this is a.
it
something.
might be a way to generate fee income too. Like if
That's what
they,
I'm saying,
if they
yeah.
do an application, like if you, like me, I probably would never do that because I don't look like a farm from my road
Yeah, but
frontage.
you're in a subdivision. You'd be like the perfect person to recognize in
You
the back. Absolutely. You're like, look
Really?
what this lady's done. They have kept this place as a farm in the back of her subdivision,
Mm-hmm.
which in theory, I bet you could sell it and a developer would go build 5 houses in there or something. I don't know.
which is what we don't want to do.
No, I know that, but you guys are willing to maintain a large piece of property
Right.
in a neighborhood. I think it's something to celebrate.
But I
I'll
think,
build you some.
well, okay, all right. I mean, besides my political signs I put, but I think it would be a good way to generate fee income for, I don't know what department or what, maybe.
I don't know if people would pay for it though.
No, I want to give them to them for, I'm thinking we get these made for like $20 a piece, not much, but if we get, I don't think we're going to have all 200 farms.
Right.
Say, we'll take one. I bet 20 people might say, hey, I'll take one. I mean, I would get one and put it on our
Yeah.
fence,
Oh, I
but
bet we get a ton of takers.
if you could get
You
them,
think?
I think so too.
It'd have to be very discreet.
100%.
but I
I think
mean,
it would be.
in the
For
grand
me,
scheme of
yeah, I mean-
things for the city's budget, we're not talking a lot of money. I mean,
Yeah.
tiny. How much do we got? Maybe we'll buy the first 5.
They're going to be more than $20. Those signs cost roughly 100 to 150, probably minimum.
But those are
Okay.
bronze, aren't they? I mean, those are the historical markers.
We could look around.
I think if we come up with the idea, the concept, we'll figure out where the money's coming from.
I think it's a great idea, Carson. I'll back you 100%.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I like
Try
that.
one.
I
Yeah,
bet
my
so many
vote.
people walk on it.
I think so too.
Yeah,
So many people will walk
I think it'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, no, thanks for sharing that with us.
Great idea.
Yep.
Can I add one thing for unfinished business?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the Milton Equestrian Spotlight, the Equestrian of the Month, we had talked about doing that a while ago.
Yeah.
And we have people who are interested now.
We do?
Yeah, we have people reaching out, which is nice. So I put together a question, Emily told me how to get that back up. So I'll email out like a rough draft
That's funny.
to you
My
guys.
email's been down too.
I know, and well, I have 2 new computers, but I'll email a rough draft to you guys if you have any feedback
Okay.
of how to
Thanks.
change it, and then we can get the first one going this month. I want to accomplish something.
Well, exactly. And especially now that school's
that's
back
awesome.
in, now that school's back
Yeah,
in
so it's back
and
and it's important because actually one of the girls is, she wants recognition for scholarship and stuff, and
Yeah.
we forget how important equestrian is, especially for
Well,
college
for a
scholarships.
while there, we were able to showcase local talent with the Herald.
Yeah, well, and that's
Yeah.
who I was going to reach out to
Yeah.
after I get the first input back,
Yeah.
and then we'll pitch it that
I
way.
think they
but-
love to recognize athletes and stuff like that. So, I mean, if we could really start showcasing people, I agree. For that, rider, I think it would help for scholarships and stuff like that. But I also think it really helps us promote what our city is involved with and
Right.
whatnot. I think that's a really good idea.
I would just ask that you loop in our communications team on that.
Okay, good.
So
Absolutely.
it's Greg who would be the one to reach out to on that. Just Greg.
Greg Vitello.
Yeah, 'cause
Greg, I think would be all over. it.
Greg and the girl who works for him, I forget her name now, but that's who I've always done the equestrian stuff with, and they're really good about getting all that out.
Okay, well, I'll send everybody a rough draft, and you
Great
guys
idea.
give something back.
Thanks for-
Great
thanks for-
idea.
Thanks for chasing that. I think that's really cool.
Super.
So I'll give you guys a quick update since we're kind of at the end of our meeting. I have been trying to follow up on the Bates property just to find out
Yeah.
if there's any traction or anything we can do. I mean, there's a lot of processes. There's a lot of things going on, I think, at the city leadership level before we're going to get too deep into that. But just to let you know, we are continuing to push on that to try to get some ideas on what could be done with that piece of property, and just, if we're as a committee are going to have the opportunity to get involved in it, and I think we will. So, it
That's
hasn't
always been
forgotten.
a point of interest for me. I
I know.
think it could be a great layover place. I think we could build a ring and charge
Yeah.
membership. There's so many things we could do with
There's
that.
just so much unknown.
And it's standing there and falling into disrepair, and it's just killing me because
Well,
to
one of the big
refurbish
questions is that
stable-
barn good enough to do something with, or is it just past its point of no return? I don't know the answer to that. Maybe
It's
it's
been standing there empty for how long
a
now?
long time.
Yeah.
Maybe it's got good bones and just needs a real
Well, it's a
wax
Morton
job, or
building.
maybe it just needs to get knocked down.
Yeah.
It's a Morton building,
Yeah.
and the only thing that I, can tell you is from my personal standpoint, the stalls are small,
Yeah.
but if we're just providing layovers.
How big
for-
are they? Like 10 by 10?
They're 10 by 10. They might be 12 by 10. But there's a lot of them, and that doesn't mean walls couldn't be taken down. But I think for a layover facility, for people going back and forth from Kentucky to Florida, I think it's a great,
Little horse show or something. You could bring horses in.
not necessarily a horse show, but I think I'd like to see the city develop a riding ring, something like the Wills Park ring,
Yeah.
and have people like me pay a membership. I can go over there right anytime if I pay the city $150 a year. Give everybody an ID
About
or
$150 a month.
use. Oh, I can find that in my couch. Come on. No,
I don't know.
but no, I think, it could be an opportunity for
Yeah.
clinicians to come.
Yeah.
There are so many good clinicians around here in every discipline. You could do something from, I think, what is the barn over on Arbor Hill is doing an anti-spooking, de-spook for Halloween. They've got Ed Dabney coming in, to help you de-spook your horse. There's so many great things that would be non-discipline specific,
Yeah.
like that.
Julie did that at her place.
love that.
Julie
Yeah.
did that. That's what I was just thinking.
Yeah, Julie
Yeah.
did do that.
Yep.
So, I'd really like to be a lot involved with that.
Okay. Anyway, I'll keep you guys in the loop, whatever I hear. If y'all hear anything, let me know.
Thanks.
So, all right. Anything else? Nope. Once we adjourn, you can talk all you want. So, yeah, give me 1 second, then we'd love to hear what you think. With that in mind, I would appreciate a motion to adjourn. Motion from Teresa, second from Nan. All in favor?
Aye, aye.
We're adjourned.
Captain.
Greg, what you got? Come on. We offline?